Let's just, when you start looking at people who are renting houses right now, a lot of people maybe want to jump into the market.
Yes.
Do you find people who are just rents are too high and now they want to go buy something?
Yeah, I have this conversation quite frequently. Like, hey, I'm spending a lot of money on rent, and the affordability factor is a lot greater in being able to buy a home, right, versus rent. And that's kind of what you touched on. And a lot of people are aware of this, but they're scared. They don't know what to do, how to begin. So, yeah, that's the dilemma they're having. And what do people do when they're confused?
Nothing. They do nothing.
Yeah.
So, Kenny, now I want to talk about definitely people listing houses. And because we're trying to gain more inventory, and maybe that will bring rents down as more people buy. But when you start talking about people needing to move from, like, say, downtown, where maybe they've rented an apartment for a very long time, and now all of a sudden they're realizing their money isn't going to get them a condo in the same neighborhood, or it's not going to get them a condo 2 neighborhoods over. Now they're 5 neighborhoods over, 10 neighborhoods over, across the lake, over the mountains there in Cle Elum. How do people deal with that when you're working with them?
Well, it's a tough conversation to have, because if you tell a certain person that they can't afford this neighborhood, of course you would say it tactfully, right?
I don't know. We just say, here's your max. Or you can only afford this. You go figure out what neighborhood you can buy in, right?
Yeah, and what makes it a tough conversation is you have certain agents that will, give you a false expectation, and you'll say, well, you know what, Kenny, I don't like the fact that you said I can't live in Bellevue, so I'll go find someone else that will tell me that I can live in Bellevue. And that is kind of a dilemma. So you have to be very tactful in the way you explain it to them, and, sit down with the great mortgage broker that breaks down their
what the real financial options are.
Exactly.
Now, you talk, when you start figuring out what agent you're going to work with, and I want to start with, the questions that you feel like people should be asking, because as you said, a lot of people will go with maybe a liar who says they can go live somewhere. They'll go with a liar who maybe says that the value of their house is more. And, I had a conversation about this the other day, and somebody told me a lot of people go with the liar because they only hear what they want to hear. And so it's very difficult to sometimes break through that wall of, look, I understand you want this, but that's not it's not realistic. Do you find that a lot?
I do. And a way around that is we've kind of developed a list of 10 questions you should ask before you hire an agent, because, of course you can say what you want to hear, but if I present you a list of 10 questions to ask and then you turn around and ask me those same questions, then
you better know the answers.
Yeah. Maybe you're able to make a better decision than, going with what you want to hear. So just the 10 questions you should ask before you hire any agent.
So what are the 10 questions you recommend people asking? And we'll try to get through 5 and maybe hammer out the last 5 here at the end of the show.
Yeah, or they can go to my website and get the other 5.
So what are some of the questions you recommend people ask?
Well,
and then I'll pretend as if I'm going to ask you. How's that?
All right. Well, what makes you different, and why should I list my home with you? That's a very important question, because everyone professes to be number one, right? You can, in so many ways, you can say, well, I am number one. I'm number one at the most failed appointment. So you need to really ask them, well, what makes you number one, and what are you going to do different that makes my home stand out favorably? Because if you go to any website, Zillow or Truly, whatever website you're searching on, you're going to find thousands of homes. So you need to ask them, what specific marketing plans do you have, and what are you going to do to make my home stand out?
And is that really what you start getting into, is the marketing plans? It's how you differentiate a plan for them, rather? I mean, I guess it's what system are you going to take me through? Because you're probably not going to change their house.
Yes.
You're not going to change the location. It's really maybe the process that you as a professional are going to take somebody through in order to get them the results they're looking for?
Yeah. Well, there's a common misconception that all agents are created equally, right? Well, that's not the case.
All 25,000 of them in Washington?
Yeah, right. So some agents will, put a sign up and put it on MLS and pray that someone else sells it. Well, if that's the agent that you want, they'll probably offer you a substantial discount. But if you want the most amount of money in the least amount of time, then there's, a marketing plan and a strategy that comes along with that.
What are some of the other big questions you recommend people ask?
What is your track record and your company's track record? Like I said, most people will say that they're number one, but how many homes have you sold? What are you doing? Does your broker control your marketing? Do you do marketing? Because, if they say the average person, according to the National Association of Realtors, sells about 5 homes a year. Well, if you sell 5 homes a year, you probably don't have the capability of marketing the home effectively, right? Can you afford ads? Are you going to run ads? And what do you do other than put it in the MLS?
Mm-hmm. Is that something that's common? I mean, because doesn't all websites kind of pull from the MLS? I mean, Is that icing on the cake, or is that really the cake?
It's a lot of homes get sold that way, right? That's why you're able to do for sale by owner. But in order to get the most amount of money in, say, a competitive market, which we had, 2 years ago, where you had to compete with foreclosures, or right now where, the last month or two, the market slowed down a little bit. So you have to be able to say, well, this is the reason why your home's going to stand out among others.
Perfect. So then are there other big questions that you have people ask? And this is Kenny Pleasant joins us. We're discussing the questions that he asked people to ask him before they hire him or any other agent.
Do you have a reference list of clients that I can contact? Ask them for their list and tell them to bring it. If they truly are good and have nothing to hide, then everyone's going to, it's easy to say that I'm great, but how about you ask them what other people think of you?
Do you tend to think that a lot of people would give their top 5 people they've ever worked with will all give rave reviews?
That's what I would do.
I mean, it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
You're not going to go, oh, yeah, well, that one was botched 4 years ago, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, there's kind of that element that makes sense. Do you think that, is there a number of transactions or something that somebody should be able to, I guess a good agent should be able to, portray that they have done?
Not necessarily. I mean, everyone has their own level of what they consider success or, fulfillment. So a person could just as well be fine with 1 or 2 homes a year or whatever, but you have to ask yourself, is that the agent that you want? Mm-hmm. Or do you want the one that has a major list of buyers? One of the things that, if you specialize in one neighborhood, like you said, you can bring your list of 5 contacts, and one is in Graham, the other one is in Marysville, right? But if you specialize in a certain neighborhood, these are your neighbors that are attesting to the fact of how great or not so great this agent is, right?
Right. And so do you tend to think that people should look at neighborhood specialists for that reason or otherwise?
I would say so because let's say, at the beginning of the year, we had this multiple offer situation where it was very, very competitive. Well, if 8 people bid on a certain house and your house is next door or down the street from that same house, those 8 people are still in the market and they also want that same house that is similar to the one that just sold. So it would make sense that you call that neighborhood specialist and say, hey, I saw that this home sold for more, which means it was probably multiple offers. And hey, where are those buyers at now? Mm-hmm. So in that sense, a neighborhood specialist would benefit you.
Yeah, definitely. Kenny Pleasant joins us with Windermere Real Estate. Kenny, we just have a little bit of time left. What are some of the other big questions you recommend people ask before they hire a real estate agent?
So I guess our protocol typically in taking a listing would be to bring comparable homes sold. And I would ask that, how about you bring comparable homes that you've sold in addition to the other homes around the market? So ask them for that list. Say, hey, well, let me see the homes that you've sold and proof that you sold in the marketing plan and things you did, which it only makes sense, right? Reputation isn't everything, but what else do you have to go by?
Right. Well, and I think that makes a lot of sense also just with that process piece, right? Because if you sold a similar home in a similar neighborhood at a high percentage of listing price, mm-hmm. then you've done that before. Now you actually have experience in going through that process that maybe somebody else has never done. And so now the photographer might be dialed in, all the traffic could be dialed in, all the different pieces of the puzzle somebody's gone through before.
Exactly. And at the end of the day, it's about bringing a buyer for your home. And obviously, if you have those buyers in waiting, which is a program that we have, then it makes sense that, I'd like to see those comparable sales.